Hello, welcome back to number, I don't remember how many this is. Um, but yeah, I don't remember exactly what we talked about last time. Oh my gosh, this is really crooked. I wish I could show you the setup. I have my phone magnetized to a lamp and it keeps falling. So I'm sorry, we're just gonna have to deal with what it is. But oh, I put up some new pictures on my wall and I want to put one here, but I haven't decided what yet. And I don't remember if this lamp was here in the last video or not, but it's from my Nana and I really like it. Anyways, I had a plan and then I left my notes somewhere, I think at work. But yeah, so I guess we'll just not have a plan once again, and I will just talk per usual. I don't remember at all what I talked about in the last videos because I've been making them months and months apart from each other, too long for me to remember at all what I was talking about. And so I'm pretty sure that I'm not skipping anything. Like, I'm pretty sure that this is where we are, but you know, I also could be wrong, and you know, you can read it for yourself then, I guess. But yeah, I think the themes, I'm just like reading this really quickly to remind myself. The themes I think I talked on were trust, and how it was in Genesis 3, it's that Eve had the opportunity to trust God and chose to choose herself, and that's really those themes. I'm pretty sure that in the first video I made, I talked about that, and that really what I'm wanting to focus on in this is the themes of choice and of intimacy, because when you read, at least for me, I think, when I've read the Bible through a lens of those, through that lens, I guess, it's been helpful for me to just see the different themes of choice and intimacy throughout Scripture. And blah, blah, blah. So that's what chapter 3 was about. And so then in chapter 4, the story moves from, to give you context, okay, go back, watch the other ones. I should have probably watched them before doing this so I could give myself context again. But we have Adam and Eve who have left the garden. Because in God's mercy, He doesn't want them to live forever in a state outside of their original design, and which would be outside of intimacy with Him. And that's the whole theme, right? They have there's a temptation, which temptation is not sin, right? Temptation is something that even Jesus is tempted in the wilderness, but that's a spoiler alert. So I think that's an important distinction, and I don't know if I've mentioned that before, but there's an important distinction between temptation and sin. I think sometimes, at least a lot of times, and something that I've struggled with a lot, and still do. And I think everybody does, is you face temptation and you're like, oh, like, what's wrong with me? Or, you know, why can't I get past this? And it's not the temptation that is sin, it's your choice and what you do with that temptation, because we always have things coming against us, right? We always have someone coming against us, and we either choose that or we choose our intimacy with our Creator. And so in chapter 3, there's this choice for Eve and for Adam to choose to trust God and what God has said, or to choose to distrust him, and they end up being manipulated by the snake. And so then we see a similar thing in the next chapter that we're about to read. But what I was wanting to say is, sorry, I'm also sick, so I will be coughing a lot. Chapter 3 wraps up with God basically saying that the man has become like one of us in knowing good and evil. And apparently not the goodness that God had wanted for us. And I think that's something to think about. Like, why is that? Why should we not know? And what's the harm in us knowing? And I think that's kind of something to ponder and think about. But anyways, there's something about it that's not quite right, and God doesn't want the humans to be stuck in an eternal life, living in a state outside of intimacy with him. And so they leave, and here we are in chapter 4. Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain. Oh, that reminds me. I made a list of everyone's names. So names are really important in the Bible. I can't remember if I've said that or not yet, but they are. I've already mentioned that Adam's name, Adam, means mankind, and it's a play on words with Adamah, which is the ground. So Adam was created out of the Adamah, so mankind was created out of the ground. And then Eve means life, and Eden means pleasure. And so humankind and life, right? A lot of people associate Eve, her name meaning life, because she's the woman who bears life, and they live in paradise in Eden. And names can actually help us understand the story a little bit better. So I wanted to have those because they're fun and they make me happy. And she conceived and bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man with the help of the Lord. So what's interesting about this, Eve sounds, this is what my the footnotes of my Bible say. This is the ESV version. I have a couple of different versions, and I don't know, I'm not going to get into the specifics of that right now. But this says, Eve sounds like the Hebrew for life giver. Oh, that's what I just said. And resembles the word for living. Yes. Cain, that's spoiling what I was about to say, which is, this says Cain sounds like the Hebrew for gotten, which I said possession. Cain, the word that it comes from is the word possession, and it's also a play on words with, in the Hebrew, it would be the word Cain and the word gotten, which is kani, I think it's kaniti, which it has, it would be kana, I believe. I don't know, I don't, this is English, I don't have the Hebrew with me right now, but basically the play on words is that she's saying, I have possessed a possession with the help of the Lord. And again, she bore his brother Abel. Abel is the word breath. So she has a possession and she has breath, which is in of itself kind of a foreshadowing, which I'll get to later. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain a worker of the ground. And so we see these two different facets of humankind. We have, right, so they're kind of like comparing and contrasting these two pillars of society, the animal keepers and the farmers. So there's that to keep in mind. So it's already started to contrast them. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground. So when it says in the course of time, it's kind of alluding that it's like the end of the season. So this is maybe like, it's just like the end of a farming season. Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat portions. So there's an important difference between these two offerings that they're bringing. They're each bringing something that they have, they're like each bringing a portion of their crop, but there's a difference between the portions they're bringing. So Cain is just bringing like a random portion. It doesn't specify what kind of portion he's bringing of his fruit, but it is very specific that Abel brought the firstborn of his flock. And this is a good example of why it's important to read scripture as a whole, and how it all connects to itself. Especially, well, I'll just leave it at that, but because you may not pick that up at the first glance, but the reason that that's important is because throughout scripture we see an importance in giving back the first fruits of random things. So the first fruits of your offspring, the first fruits of your crop, the first fruits of whatever money you make. And so there's all of this distinction. Maybe like a better word is like there's all of this emphasis put on giving the first of whatever you have, giving the best of whatever you have, because that's what is a sacrifice. If you, right, it holds more significance and weight. It's more of a sacrifice to give away the best of what you have than to keep it for yourself. I mean, I don't think I need to explain that very much. I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory, right? Like, for example, I need more. I should have built this up. Like, for example, there is, oh, what's his name? Oh, blah, blah, blah. His name, the priest, the king of peace, the king of Salem. What's his name? It's also, the guy, the king that lives forever. What is his name? I cannot remember it. But I think Abraham goes and gives him Melchizedek. Okay, it took me a second. But for example, like Abraham comes and it is Abraham, right? I think it is. Abraham goes and gives Melchizedek like a 10%, like a 10th tithe or something. I don't remember all the details, okay? It's late at night. It's like midnight right now. And there's also a story in 1st or 2nd Samuel of David, the Nathan, I think. I think Nathan is the name of that guy. what's his name? Gives him a something. No, I'm just talking and I don't even remember where it is. Hold on. Blah, blah, blah. No, no, no. 2 Samuel. Yes, here. And no. No. Blah, blah, blah. It is Nathan. That's right. This is in 2 Samuel 12. Okay, yeah, here it is. It's the story of, where is it? There were 2 men in a certain city, the one rich and the other poor. The rich man had very many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing but one little ewe lamb, which he had bought. And I'm not going to read all of this because I'm realizing that I'm getting distracted telling this story, but the point is that it was more of a sacrifice for the poor man to give for his one lamb to be taken than for one lamb of the rich man who had many lambs. Did I say that right? To be taken? Anyways, that's all I'm trying to say. What was I trying to say? That that it's more of a sacrifice. Oh, that was such a rabbit trail. For the best of whatever you have to be given away. Okay, back on track. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So we have to think about that. Why would God have no regard for what Cain had given? And I've always interpreted that to be because Cain did not give the best of what he had to offer. He kept the best for himself. He still brought an offering to God, but it seems like more that Cain brought an offering to God because he had to, not because he was actually giving the best of what he had. It was not truly a sacrifice. And so in that way, Cain is not honoring God. He's just doing it because he has to. And I don't really think that God cares about you doing stuff because you think you have to. I think God cares about you doing it because you're actually coming in worship and in humility and in honor. And it's not honoring to bring God something that you don't care about, right? That's kind of selfish. So that's how I've always interpreted that. Blah, blah, blah. But for Cain and his offering, he had no regard. So Cain was very angry and his face fell. So, that makes sense, but also what did you expect, Cain? The Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? And why has your face fallen?" Well, here's the thing. Here's the funny thing that I always like to pay attention to. When God asks someone a question, it's not like he doesn't know. And I think that's the funny thing is if God is all-knowing, all-powerful, he's not asking us questions because he doesn't know the answer. So then that begs the question of, well, then why would he ask? If he's not truly wondering, then why does he ask? And I think that reason is because he's looking for intimacy in that moment. He's giving Cain the opportunity to process what he's feeling. He's giving Cain the opportunity to repent and to dialogue with the Lord. And that's right, like how you build relationship. Cain could have been like, well, I've blah, blah, blah. Like, I feel upset because of this, and, you know, whatever. Why are you angry, and why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? So God's saying, like, hey, you know, if you actually care, then I will care, you know, but why would I accept something that I know isn't your best? You know, a relationship is like a two-way street. Need I say more? So, if you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is against you. Or for you. It kind of like means the same thing. Like, its desire is for you, but like against you because it's not in your best interest. But you must rule over it. So in this, God is giving Cain wisdom, and saying, hey, look, this is what's going to happen if you do not rule over this anger, if you do not speak out against the animal crouching at the door, you know, looking to devour you, right? That's the imagery that's painted here, is that sin, right, which I said earlier is the choice. Like, sin is like an animal waiting, like crouching for you. Its desire is to rule you, in the same way that it's the same imagery as like the snake, right? The snake was like this animal, like sly, slithering, like looking to take advantage of the humans, and looking to actually overtake them by manipulating them, and we get this same imagery with this with sin being this animal crouching at the door. So, right, it doesn't specifically say animal, but it's like, that's the poetic language here that's being used. So, he's like giving him instruction, like, you have this temptation right now to be angry, but you actually have to rule over this desire to, you know, I don't know where I was going with that, but you get the point. So, next, this is verse 8. Cain spoke to Abel his brother, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Now, why would he do that, right? Like, his qualm was with God. God, why do you like the offering I gave you? Like, what's your deal? And God's like, hey, let's figure this out. Like, don't do that. But then he kills his brother. In that, I think I interpret jealousy. He's jealous because God honors his brother's offering, and doesn't honor his. But why is he jealous, right? What did Abel do? What did Abel do against Cain? There's nothing here in the story that would allude to Abel doing anything wrong, except for the fact that he has the honor that Cain wants. And so instead of dealing with his own selfishness and dealing with his own anger, he decides to avoid that by taking out taking out the reminder of his pain, which is that someone else had been honored in the way he desired. And so, yeah, he gets killed. So that's too bad. But what's interesting is what I was saying earlier. Cain's name means possession, and Abel's name means breath. And to me, those names are very interesting because I see like this imagery of Cain taking Abel's breath. And it's like what their names mean. So that's probably on purpose. So, yes, next. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is Abel your brother?" Oh, God's asking a question again. So I'm just going to do exactly what I said earlier. Why would God be asking Abel, or why would God be asking Cain this question? I mean, God knows exactly where Abel is, and God even says this in the next passage. I'm going to skip ahead and say that God exposes the issue and says, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground." So God knows all along what has happened, so why would he ask Cain? I think in this moment he's again offering Cain the opportunity to speak up, and to confess, to meet God in relationship and to meet God in intimacy, right? Because that's what that means, being vulnerable. Vulnerability is the basis for any relationship, and so God keeps meeting Cain with opportunities for vulnerability, right? You know, why are you angry, Cain? You know, do you want to be vulnerable with me? You know, where is your brother? Do you want to be vulnerable with me in this moment? But he doesn't. He said, "I do not know. Am I my brother's keeper?" This is such a famous line. But what's interesting is that this sounds very familiar to what happened with their parents in just the last chapter, when God says, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree of which I commanded you not to eat?" And so what's interesting here is that God knows exactly what happened. God knows that the snake has manipulated them, but God gives Adam the opportunity to be vulnerable in this moment, and share what's happened. And instead, Adam chooses to shift the blame. Adam chooses to kind of de-escalate the guilt off of him, and instead says, you know, God's talking to Adam, "Have you eaten of the tree of which I commanded you not to eat?" And Adam's like, "The woman that you gave me to be with, she screwed me over." And it's the same, I see this same type of imagery in this story of God being like, "Hey, Cain, where's your brother?" And Cain's like, "Am I my brother's keeper?" It's kind of like, why are you, you know, what, me? No, what? Yeah, so anyways, I feel like there's a connection there, so as well. Blah, blah, blah. And the Lord said, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground." So, I just think that's such an interesting image. Like, I just see his body. This is like kind of gruesome, but his body, like, literally there in the ground, like clawing through the dirt, like clinging to God. And it's a very interesting picture, and it's terribly sad. But anyways, "And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand." I really love all the poetry here. I love poetry, and this type of imagery is so beautiful to me. The writer did such an amazing job. Whoever they are, they're dead now, but maybe one day I'll meet them in heaven and we can talk about it, because it's very intentionally crafted, and everything means something, and everything is very intentionally written and lines up, and the story is just very good. But yeah, I love that passage. It's very vivid and jarring imagery, and I think it's very well done. But so I want to read it again. And the Lord said, "What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying to me from the ground. And now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to you its strength. You shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the land." So this is the same thing that happened to Adam and Eve. They are exiled from the garden, right? They have to leave God's paradise. They have to leave God's presence. And this is the same thing that happens to Cain. Cain is now told that he has to leave God's safety, leave God's presence, and wander the earth, right? So it's the same type of, we're getting the same storyline here, right? Temptation, choice, and then the consequence for not choosing intimacy with the Lord is leaving his presence, leaving his protection. And so it's kind of like a purposeful pattern that sets us up for a lot of stories, aka the rest of the Bible. So yeah, anyways, Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me today from the ground, and from your face I shall be hidden." It's interesting because even with all of this, when you work the ground, it shall no longer yield to its strength. That's the same thing that happened with Adam, right? God was like, you're going to try to work the earth and it's going to be terribly difficult. And it's almost like you can't do your purpose without God. And without being in relationship with God, you can't successfully do the things that God has created you to do, right? We read in Genesis already that God created us to multiply on the earth and to steward the earth, and that's not exactly what the words are, but it is blah, 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 blah. Where is it? Yes. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and blah, blah, blah. But we're seeing through these stories that they're not even able to complete their purpose for what they were created for well without being with God. Okay, I'm on the wrong page here. I don't remember even where I stopped reading. I'm just going to start again. Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, you have driven me today away from the ground, and from your face I shall be hidden. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." Well, you already killed a guy, dude, so... But basically Cain is like, God, what the heck? This is too much. Like, and it's interesting because even in this moment, he's still thinking of himself, right? He's still thinking of himself. He's not saying, God, I can't bear to be away from you. He's saying, God, you're gonna let me die? Somebody's gonna kill me. Like, this is too much. It's not too much that he's gonna be away from God, but it's too much because he doesn't want to die. So that's interesting. Then the Lord said to him, "Not so. If anyone kills Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold." And the Lord put a mark on Cain lest any who found him should attack him. Well, what's interesting is that even in his selfishness, God still protects him. And that's that. Then Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod. Nod means wandering. East of Eden. East of Eden, great book, great analogy, and great setup for the rest of the scriptures. Once again, as I've already said many times, what's significant about East is that throughout the Bible, the East is used to symbolize typically bad things. So, for example, the east side of the temple, or maybe it wasn't the it's like the east wall of the temple, or the east side of Jerusalem, something like that. Anyways, there's something about the east, and I don't have a list with me, it's just off the top of my head, that's kind of like not that great. And traditionally in Jewish practice, it was like, I think that it was like blocked off, and it was kind of like the not good part. I think that's also where where there was like a grave, and they weren't allowed to go over there because the Jewish people couldn't walk through graves, I'm pretty sure. And anyways, that we kind of see in different ways that something being on the east side was like the part. What's crazy is that Jesus went to heaven on the east side, and he's also prophesied to return to earth at the east gate. And what's crazy is that, this is also a sidebar, but the town of Bethany was at the east side. And it's actually something that I love about my name, and something that means a lot to me, is that the town of Bethany was on the east side of Jerusalem, and, well, it still is, it's still there, you can go there today. I think that it would be fun to go there sometime. But it was kind of like where all the sick and dying people were sent. And it was kind of like a rundown town, and it's actually where Jesus spent a lot of time, and traveled through and actually stayed there, which is significant because it was kind of the area where nobody wanted to be, and it was again on the side with all the sick people, and where the grave was, and where, you know, the wall was blocked off and you couldn't go through that side. Something along those lines. I don't have the specifics laid out in front of me, but I think what's so beautiful about that story is that we see in the Gospels that that's the place where nobody was supposed to be, and where nobody was supposed to go, and where the people that nobody cared about were. That's where Jesus decided to pass on his ministry, and also where he decided to come back one day. And I think there's something so beautiful about that. And the reason that it means a lot to me is because that's something that I get to carry on. And I feel like that's prophetic in my name, because I love to be a place for people who are wandering. I love to be a place for people who are broken and sick and feel like they're dying. because I find myself in that space as well. And it is the Lord that has brought me healing, and it is the Lord that has brought me peace in my sickness and has brought me wholeness in my wandering. And I get to host a space in myself for others in that. And so yeah, that, I think that symbolism means a lot to me at a personal level, because that's my name. And anyways, back to the issue at hand here. Yeah, but that just makes me happy. So, anyways, they went east of Eden. That's how we got there. Cain knew his wife. They did sleep together. And she conceived and bore Enoch. To my list of names, Enoch means dedicated. Which is interesting because the next sentence is, when he built a city, he called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. So Cain dedicated a city. Dedicated. Anyways, to Enoch was born Irad, which means fleet. Don't know the significance there. And Irad fathered Mehuhel. I did not say that right. And it means wiped out by God. So that's interesting. And he fathered Methushael. Anything with El at the end means of God, because El means God. And this means who is of God, because I think meth is man, so that's why it means like man of God, who is of God. Lamech is powerful, which is significant. You will see in one moment. Lamech, powerful. And Lamech took 2 wives. Ahem. This is a turning point. A turning point in the original design of marriage. We're literally only 4 chapters into the Bible. I am on page 4 of the Bible out of over 1,000 pages. And yeah, already got screwed up. So we already saw like a lot of things up to this point, but this is the first story where we see someone take 2 wives instead of the original, 1 wife and then becoming 1 and everything that was spoken on earlier. So blah blah blah, took 2 wives. The names of one was Adah, which means ornament, and the name of the other was Zillah, which means, what did I say? Shade. Okay. Don't know if someone wants to think on that. I didn't think too hard on that. Wasn't not my priority today. So, Adah bore Jabal. He was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. His brother's name was Jubal and Jubal. That's like naming your kid Mike and Mark or something. He was the father of all those who play the lyre and pipe. Zillah also bore Tubal-Cain. He was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron. The sister of Tubal-Cain was Naamah. So what's interesting here is that we're kind of seeing like this little society being built. I am almost out of water and I am very thirsty, but I'm not about to go get some because then I would have to pause this. Okay. So, we have Lamech, he gets 2 wives, which is previously not supposed to happen, but you know what? These people become some pillars of society here. We have the tent makers and the livestock people and the musicians and the the metal makers. And so these are all like big pillars of culture and society, and they're all being created here in this family. So Lamech said to his wives, because Lamech's name was powerful. So it's kind of the symbolism of like power and culture and creating this city. So yeah, Lamech said to his wives, Adah and Zillah, hear my voice, you wives of Lamech. Listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech's is 77. That's a lot. So, what's interesting here is that we have this Lamech guy, and he kind of sounds like a jerk. He has 2 wives, he killed somebody, and killed, actually, I think 2 people, and, you know, he's building a city, and all of this stuff is happening, and he's like, hey, if God saved Cain, and Cain killed one guy, then I should get even more. It seems like he's kind of saying he should get more because he killed more people. That's kind of messed up. Well, anyways, it's very interesting. I'm going to have to think on that more, but I didn't think enough on it to say anything right now. Next, and Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and called him Seth. Seth means compensation. For she said, God has appointed for me compensation. I don't think that's right. I think it also means, I also read that it means he appointed, which makes more sense because then Eve said, God has appointed for me another offspring instead of Abel. Yes, so it would be like another wordplay, which is kind of following the pattern that we've already seen here so far, of like Cain being very similar to the word to possess. I've possessed a possession, and here she's saying, God has appointed another appointed for me instead of Abel, for Cain killed him. To Seth also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh, which means mankind. At that time, people began to call upon the name of the Lord, which is that same word, man. So this is interesting. So there's a lot of wordplay going on here. So here it would sound like, to Seth also a son was born, and he named his name Mankind. And at that time, mankind began to call upon the name of the Lord. So that's all of chapter 4. And what we have here is mostly a lot of wordplay, a lot of like kind of these overlapping meanings, and some also similar layout to previous chapters. And so we've already started to see this pattern of like God had a design. The design was to be in relationship with us. People chose to do stuff on their own, and they were like, God, we don't need you, peace out, bye. And when they decided to choose themselves over trusting the Lord, then they forfeited relationship with him. And that might sound harsh, but also, like, isn't that literally how relationships work? Like, if you come to me and I say, I want to be in a relationship with you. And then you're like, I don't want to be in a relationship with you. I want to go do my own thing. Then I would probably be like, okay, have fun with that. I'm not going to force you to be with me, right? That would be like manipulating you, or some weird, I would have to kidnap you or something. And that's the thing, is like, I think I said this earlier, but like, love is choice. And so if you love somebody, you choose them. And also, if you love somebody and they don't choose you, you won't force them. You can't force somebody to love you. And so when we choose to love ourselves, and I'm not talking about like taking care of yourself, like that's different. I'm talking about like in a moment, God is telling you one thing and you're telling yourself another thing, and you choose yourself over choosing the voice of the Lord. In that moment, I'm talking about like a selfish type of love other than vulnerability, right? You're choosing to not be vulnerable with the Lord. You're choosing to not trust His design for your life, because it's safer to do your own thing, right? It seems safer to do your own thing. Maybe you feel like with Eve, you would be missing out on what God could give to you, like God's holding out on you, and you would be missing out on life if you chose the Lord. Or in Cain's story, you know, if you chose the Lord, you would have to give up something that has meaning to you. If you chose the Lord, you may have to let go of an anger that you may have formed identity with, or all these different sorts of things. Or like Lemech, you may have to let go of power. You may have to let go of authority. And so there's all these different examples that we're already seeing. And it's very interesting because the Bible is pretty much just a huge story of really messed up people. And also, the entire story arc of the whole thing is that even though everybody keeps choosing to do their own thing, there's still this jealous God that burns to be in relationship with you and still chooses you and still keeps showing up to give you opportunities to be in relationship with Him, and still keeps fighting for you, and still keeps reaching out to you and speaking over you and sending people into your life to call you out or to call you higher. And that's the story that we see time and time and time again. And it's even a story that I've seen in my own life. And so, yeah, that's like a bit of foreshadowing. But I'm holding fast to those themes of choice and of intimacy, because that is love. And I think at its core, the foundation of love is choice. And coupled with that is trust. And that's where we bring in vulnerability and all these other things that we've talked about today. So, yeah. And also sacrifice too. There was an element of that today as well. Because sometimes trusting people means sacrificing for them. I think when we offer ourselves to God or to people, in a way that says, I'm willing to give up what is most valuable to me in order to be with you. There is a lot of significance in that. So, yeah, I think that's a really beautiful thing. And in regular life, right, we see that as honoring. We see that all the time. Maybe in someone giving up their dream to work a job so that they can take care of their family. That sucks. But we would see that as an act of love, right? Or the opposite. Maybe you are in a partnership. Maybe you're in a marriage with someone, and you sacrifice your desire for comfort in order for the other person to live their dream, right? That maybe doesn't make a lot of money, but that's an act of love on your part, right? You're sacrificing your need for comfort in order for them to be able to do something that brings them joy. And so we see examples of that in the world all around us, and yet there's this disconnect on why would I not love God the same way? Why would the basic principles of building a relationship with God be any different than the basic principles of building a relationship with anybody else? Like, why should I live a life that gives things to God? It's like, well, why would you not do that with anyone else? How could you form a relationship with anybody else without giving something to them that is valuable to you? Your time, your resources, a piece of your heart, a piece of your soul. And in that can look like sharing a piece of who you are in your vulnerability and in your commitment, in the things that matter most to you. And so I think that there's a lot of beauty to behold in that. And I think that the same basic principles of honor and care and respect go for building a relationship with the Lord. And it's in those foundational principles that we learn how to best build a relationship with one another. And I hope for you is that as we study what it looks like to build a relationship with the Lord, we're renewed in our knowledge of what it takes to build a relationship with one another. I think that it's proved to be a useful knowing for me. That as I've taken the time to ponder more on what does it look like to be intimate with the Lord, I have developed a deeper and greater understanding of what it means to be in deeper relationship with the people around me in life, and to build better friendships, and to be a better friend, to be a better sister, to be a better daughter, to be a better partner, to be a better co-worker and teammate, and all the things. So I've learned to love people better as I've learned to love my Lord better, and I'm very grateful for that, and it makes me happy. So that's my little tangent, and that's how I'm drawing the story all back to my themes, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I always feel a little awkward at the start of these, and I don't know ever how quite to start them. But once I get into it, it gets a little bit better. So thank you for bearing with me as I figure out how to talk to no one. So maybe come talk to me about it in real life and we'll have a good conversation. So yes. Okay. Bye.